Andrew, please drive me somewhere private. Those words escaped from Diane Montgomery's lips, and I swear my pulse stopped for a moment. This was my former girlfriend's mother, the same woman who used to serve me roast beef at Sunday suppers, the same woman who smiled warmly when Rachel and I declared we were together, and now she was seated in my passenger seat requesting that I take her somewhere private, and I had completely no clue what to do. Let me rewind, because this entire situation started in the strangest way imaginable. I'm Andrew Hayes, and I sell insurance in Phoenix, not thrilling work. I help families choose health coverage and life policies. Covers the bills for my modest apartment near downtown. Tonight was meant to be straightforward. My company purchased a table at this charity art auction in Scottsdale, and my boss informed me I had to attend. I despise these events. Everyone's dressed formally, pretending to appreciate art they don't comprehend, drinking wine that costs excessive amounts. But I wore my one decent suit and appeared because that's what you do when you want to maintain your job. I was positioned near the rear, observing a painting of ocean waves crashing against rocks, when I heard someone weeping, not loud weeping, the quiet kind where someone's trying hard not to let anyone notice. I glanced around and spotted her standing in the corner by a tall plant. Diane Montgomery. I recognized her instantly, even though I hadn't seen her in 2 years. She looked different, though, smaller somehow. Her shoulders were trembling just a little bit. For a moment, I considered walking away. Rachel and I broke up badly. She labeled me boring and said I had no ambition. She relocated to New York to work for some major law firm, and I remained here doing the same job, living the same life. Seeing her mom felt like reopening an old wound. But something about the way Diane stood there trying so hard to hold herself together made me approach. "Mrs. Montgomery," I said quietly. She jumped slightly, then turned to look at me. Her eyes were red. Her makeup was smudged under her left eye where she'd probably wiped away tears. "Andrew," she said, and her voice sounded weary, "I didn't realize you'd be here." "Work thing," I explained. "Are you okay?" She laughed, but it wasn't a joyful sound. "Do I appear okay?" I didn't know what to say to that. We stood there awkwardly for a minute while people walked past us laughing and discussing the art. Finally, she spoke again. "Gregory was supposed to accompany me tonight. He owns the development company sponsoring this event, but he phoned an hour ago and said he had a meeting. Always a meeting. Always something more pressing." She wiped her eyes with her fingers. "He instructed me to call a car service when I'm ready to depart. Like I'm just another appointment on his schedule. Gregory Montgomery. I'd met him several times when I dated Rachel. Tall guy. Always wore costly suits. Talked on his phone constantly. He made substantial money in real estate. Built shopping centers and apartment complexes all over Arizona. The kind of guy who made you feel small just by being in the room." "I'm sorry," I said, "because what else do you say?" Diane looked at me for a long moment. "You always were kind, Andrew. Rachel didn't deserve you. That caught me off guard." "I should probably get going," I said, suddenly uncomfortable. "Wait." She grabbed my arm. Her hand was trembling. "I can't go home yet. I can't walk into that empty house and sit by myself waiting for him to return from whatever meeting he's really at. I can't." Something in her voice reminded me of how I felt after Rachel departed. That hollow feeling where you know you should do something, but you can't figure out what. "Do you want to get coffee or something?" I offered. She shook her head. "Not here. Somewhere no one recognizes me. Somewhere I can just breathe for a minute without being Gregory Montgomery's wife." That's how we ended up in my car. I told her I knew a place, and she followed me to the parking lot without asking where. My Honda Civic looked ridiculous next to all the Mercedes and BMWs in the lot, but she entered without saying anything. She sat very still in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. I started driving, heading away from Scottsdale toward Tempe. The city lights blurred past us. Neither of us spoke for maybe 10 minutes. Then she turned to me and said, "Andrew, please drive me somewhere private." My grip on the steering wheel got so tight my knuckles turned white. "Mrs. Montgomery, I'm not certain I'm not attempting to seduce you," she interrupted. Her voice cracked on those words. "I just need to not be at home. I need to not be anywhere Gregory would search for me. Please, just for an hour, just somewhere I can think." Every intelligent part of my brain said to turn around and drive her straight home. This was strange. This was crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. But I looked at her face in the glow from the dashboard, and she looked so lost, so desperate, like a person drowning who just needed someone to throw her a rope. "Okay." I heard myself say, "I know a place." The Velvet Room sat between a used bookstore and a Thai restaurant. Easy to miss if you weren't searching for it. A faded purple awning hung over the door, and warm light spilled from windows covered in posters for local bands. I'd started coming here about 6 months after Rachel departed. On nights when my apartment felt too quiet and being alone felt like slowly disappearing, I found parking half a block away. Diane still hadn't said anything since I agreed to bring her somewhere private. When I turned off the engine, she finally looked at me. "What is this place somewhere with life?" I said. Music, strangers, conversations, nobody here knows either of us. Something in her face relaxed just a little. We walked to the entrance, and I held the door open. Inside smelled like old leather and coffee with a hint of something sweet from the Thai place next door. The walls were exposed brick covered in framed photos of jazz musicians from decades ago. Maybe 30 people filled the space, scattered at small tables or sitting at the bar. A woman with short gray hair stood on the small stage in the corner, singing something slow and sad while a guy played piano behind her. We slid into a booth near the back, tucked away from most of the crowd. The table was old wood, scratched and worn smooth by years of use. A candle in a red glass holder flickered between us. A waitress came over, maybe 50 years old, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt. She had kind eyes. "What can I get you folks?" she asked. "Whiskey," Diane said immediately. "A double." "Neat." The waitress raised her eyebrows but didn't comment. She looked at me. "Just water," I said. "With ice?" "You got it." She disappeared toward the bar. Disappeared. Diane was looking around the club like she was seeing something from another planet. The mismatched chairs, the people in regular clothes instead of designer outfits, the musicians playing for tips instead of thousands of dollars. "This is perfect," she said quietly. "Thank you." "You're welcome." The drinks arrived. Diane picked up her glass and took a real drink, not a small sip. She closed her eyes as she swallowed. When she opened them again, they were wet with tears. She was trying not to let fall. "I used to create things," she said suddenly. "Did Rachel ever mention that?" I shook my head. "Tell me what sculptures." "I worked with clay, bronze, sometimes stone. I had a studio in my apartment before I married Gregory. Nothing fancy, just a room with good light and tools everywhere. I'd spend entire days there, covered in dust and clay, creating pieces that felt alive under my hands." She stared into her whiskey like she could see the past in it. "I sold a few pieces, never made much money, but that wasn't the point. Creating something from nothing felt like magic." "What happened to it?" I asked. Her laugh was bitter. "I married a successful man." "That's what happened." Gregory said the mess was inappropriate, said the smell of the materials gave him headaches. He suggested I join charity boards instead, help select art for his buildings, appreciate other people's work instead of making my own. He made it sound so reasonable, like he was helping me mature and be more sophisticated. She took another drink. "So I stopped, packed up my tools, put them in storage, and became Mrs. Gregory Montgomery, the perfect wife for a successful developer, beautiful at events, quiet at dinners, never messy, never inconvenient." I didn't know what to say. The woman singing on stage hit a high note that made the whole room go quiet. "I'm sorry," Diane continued. "You don't need to hear all this. You're just being nice, driving me around because you're a good person." "I'm not just being nice," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. "I understand it more than you think." She looked at me, really looked at me. Rachel. Rachel labeled me boring the night she departed, said I was too comfortable with being average. She wanted someone who'd chase big dreams with her, relocate to exciting places, take risks. I wanted stability, a normal life with normal problems. She called that settling, called me mediocre. I ran my finger along the condensation on my water glass. That was 2 years ago. I've been playing it safe ever since. Work, home, sleep, same thing every day. No risks, no pain, no feeling much of anything. "You're lonely," Diane said. Not a question, a statement. "I'm careful," I corrected her. She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close. "Lonely is what happens when you're careful for too long." The words hit me hard because they were true. I had been lonely. So lonely that I'd convinced myself I was fine. That being numb was better than hurting. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Why tonight? Why me?" Diane pulled her hand back and wrapped both hands around her whiskey glass. "Because you listen without wanting something from me. Because when you look at me, you see a person. Not Gregory Montgomery's wife. Not Rachel's mother. Just me. I haven't felt seen in so long that I forgot what it was like." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "And because I'm drowning, Andrew, I've been drowning for years. And tonight I just needed someone to notice." I understood that feeling too. The slow suffocation of a life that looked fine from the outside but felt empty inside. The singer on stage finished her song. People clapped. Someone laughed at the bar. Normal life happening all around us while we sat in our corner booth talking about how we both lost ourselves. Her phone lit up on the table between us. Gregory's name flashed on the screen once, twice, 3 times. Diane stared at it like it was a snake. "He's checking his inventory," she said flatly, "making sure everything's where it should be." The phone buzzed again. A text this time, then another. Diane didn't reach for it. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't be his thing, his perfect accessory. I'd rather be nobody than be his nothing." Those words hung in the air between us, heavy, true, dangerous. "You're not nobody," I said. "You never were." She looked at me with tears running down her face now, not bothering to hide them anymore. "I need to tell you something else, but not here. Not with people around. Can we go somewhere quieter, just for a few minutes?" Every warning bell in my head went off. This was how bad decisions happen. This was how lives got complicated. But I looked at her face and saw someone who needed help, who needed to be heard, who needed to know she wasn't alone. "Okay," I said. "Let me pay." We drove to Papago Park in silence. The overlook was quiet this time of night, just a few other cars scattered across the parking area. I pulled into a spot where we could see the city lights spread out below us like a blanket of fallen stars. The engine ticked as it cooled. Neither of us moved. She turned toward me in the passenger seat, and I could see her hands shaking even in the dim light from the dashboard. "He doesn't strike me," Diane said suddenly, like she needed me to understand that first. "Gregory has never raised his hand to me, never even raised his voice. Really, that's what makes it so hard to explain to people." I kept my eyes on the road ahead, giving her space to talk, but my chest felt tight. "Then, what is it?" I asked quietly. Diane let out a long breath. Control. Quiet. Constant control. Started small. So small I didn't even notice at first. He'd suggest what I should wear to certain events, said he just wanted to help me fit in with his business associates' wives. Then it was suggestions about who I should have lunch with. He'd say things like, Margaret is going through a rough patch right now, maybe give her some space. Or, those pottery class friends of yours seem a bit scattered, don't they? Always gentle, always framed as concern. Her phone buzzed again on her lap. She glanced down at it, and I saw her jaw tighten. He's asking where I am, she said flatly. Third time in 20 minutes. Not because he's worried about my safety, because he needs to know where his things are at all times. His things. The words came out harder than I meant them to. That's what I am, Andrew, a thing, a beautiful thing he acquired and maintains. He has a calendar alert that reminds him when I'm due for hair appointments. He built me that studio at home. Spent $30,000 on equipment and materials. But every time I actually try to work in there, he finds a reason to interrupt. A dinner I need to prepare for. A charity event that needs my attention. A contractor who needs to discuss tile choices for the guest bathroom renovation. I never asked for. She was talking faster now. Words spilling out like water from a cracked dam. I let her go, sensing she needed to purge this. We have separate bedrooms, Diane continued, have had for 8 years. He says it's because of his sleep schedule that he doesn't want to disturb me when he works late. But Andrew, we're strangers who share an address. He comes to my room twice a month on Tuesdays like it's a scheduled maintenance appointment. Then he goes back to his wing and I lie there wondering when I stopped being a person and became a museum piece. I didn't know what to say. My own relationship troubles with Rachel seemed tiny compared to this, like complaining about a hangnail to someone with a broken bone. 3 months ago, Diane said, her voice dropping lower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I looked up divorce attorneys, found one named Linda Harper. She's supposed to be one of the best in Arizona for these kinds of cases. These kinds? I asked high-asset divorces where one spouse has significantly more power than the other. Linda's handled cases against men like Gregory before. Successful men who are used to winning who don't accept no for an answer. Diane's phone lit up again. This time it was a call, not a text. Gregory's name flashed on the screen. She stared at it like it was a venomous snake, then hit the button to silence it. I actually went to see her, Diane continued, sat in her office with its view of downtown Phoenix and told her everything. The control, the isolation, the way I've disappeared into his life. Linda listened, took notes, asked good questions. She said I had solid grounds, said Arizona is a community property state that I could walk away with enough assets to start over comfortably. But I prompted because I could hear the hesitation in her voice. But then she asked if I was prepared for what Gregory would do. She didn't sugarcoat it, Andrew. She said, men like him don't just let their wives leave. They fight. They hire private investigators to dig up anything they can use. They leak stories to make you look unstable or opportunistic. They have lawyers file motion after motion until you're buried in paperwork and legal fees, and you're so exhausted you just want it to stop. Diane wiped at her eyes quickly, not wanting to let the tears fall. Linda told me about a previous client whose husband hired someone to follow her for months, took photos of her having coffee with a male colleague, then tried to paint it as an affair. Another client whose husband had her followed to therapy sessions, then used her depression diagnosis to argue she was mentally unfit. These men weaponize everything. They turn your vulnerabilities into ammunition. What did you do? I asked. I walked out of Linda's office and went home. Told myself I was being dramatic, that my life wasn't that bad, that maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was ungrateful. Gregory gives me everything money can buy. A beautiful home, financial security, social status. Who was I to complain? Someone who wants to be seen as a person, I said. She looked at me then. Really? Looked at me and her eyes were bright with tears. She was fighting to hold back. Yes, she whispered, exactly that. Another buzz from her phone. A text this time. Even from where I sat, I could see the message preview. Diane, I need to know where you are. This is inappropriate. Inappropriate, she repeated bitterly. That's his favorite word. It was inappropriate when I wanted to take a sculpture class at the community college. Inappropriate when I suggested we downsize from the Paradise Valley house to something smaller and more manageable. Inappropriate when I told him I was lonely. I reached across without thinking, not quite touching her hand, but close, letting her know I was there. Why tonight? I asked. What changed? Diane took a shaky breath. I was standing in that gallery looking at one of those paintings, and I realized I've been drowning for so long that I forgot what breathing felt like. Then I saw you, and you looked at me like I was actually there. Not Mrs. Gregory Montgomery, not the wife, just me. And I couldn't go home. I couldn't walk back into that house and pretend for one more night that I'm fine. Her phone rang again. This time she picked it up, and I watched her type out a response with steady hands. Needed some air after the auction. Home soon? She set the phone down with finality and looked at me. Drive me back now, Andrew, please, before I lose my nerve. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my apartment staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Diane had said, feeling the weight of what I'd stepped into. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, I finally admitted to myself what I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just about being kind to someone in need. I cared about her. Really cared in a way that was going to complicate everything. My phone buzzed at 7:23. Unknown number. It's Diane. I got your number from Rachel's old contact list. I hope that's okay. My heart jumped. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Of course. Are you all right? I called Linda, the attorney. I have a meeting with her tomorrow at 2. Andrew, I'm actually doing this. I could hear the fear and determination mixed together in her voice, like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump. That's good, I said, meaning it. That's really good, Diane. I'm terrified. That means you're doing something real, I told her. Being scared is better than being numb. There was a pause. Then, can we talk after the meeting tomorrow? I know this is asking a lot, but I don't have many people I can trust right now. And you listened without judging me. I should have said no. Should have told her I'd done my part, that she needed to lean on her sister or friends or anyone else but her ex-girlfriend's former boyfriend. Instead, I heard myself say, coffee somewhere public tomorrow after your meeting. Thank you, she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. Thank you for everything. The next afternoon, I arrived at the cafe in Mesa 15 minutes early. It was called The Daily Grind, chosen specifically because it was far from anywhere Gregory or his associates would go. The place had mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and a relaxed atmosphere that felt safe. Diane walked in at exactly 2:45, and I barely recognized her at first. She wore faded jeans and a simple cardigan, her hair styled in a casual way I'd never seen before. No expensive jewelry except small earrings. She looked younger somehow, less polished, but more real. When she spotted me, her whole face changed. The tension I'd seen at the auction was gone, replaced by something that looked like relief mixed with exhaustion. She ordered a latte and sat down across from me, setting her bag on the chair beside her like it weighed 100 pounds. I did it, she said without preamble. I hired Linda, signed the retainer agreement an hour ago. I'm filing for divorce. The words hung between us, massive and irreversible. How do you feel? I asked. Diane wrapped both hands around her coffee cup, a gesture I was starting to recognize as her way of grounding herself when everything felt unstable. Like I'm standing on the edge of something terrifying, but also like I can breathe for the first time in years. She paused. Linda asked me where I'm staying. I told her I'm moving in with Margaret, my sister. She lives in Tempe, has a guest room, and she's been asking me to leave Gregory for 3 years. When I called her this morning and told her what I was doing, she actually cried, said she'd been waiting for this call forever. That's good. I said, you need people around you. Linda also warned me about what's coming, Diane continued, her voice getting quieter. She said, Gregory will try to paint me as unstable or opportunistic, that he'll have investigators looking into my life, my activities, my relationships, looking for anything he can use against me. The implication hit me immediately. My relationships? You mean me? She met my eyes, guilt flickering across her face. Andrew, I'm so sorry. I didn't think about what this would mean for you when I asked you to drive me that night. If Gregory finds out about the Velvet Room, about Papago Park, about these coffee meetings, he already knows. I said Diane froze her coffee cup halfway to her lips. What? He called me yesterday morning, left a message on my phone. I pulled out my phone and played it for her. Gregory's voice came through calm and measured. Andrew Gregory Montgomery, I understand you've been spending time with my wife. I'm sure you meant well, but I'd advise you to be very careful about the situations you involve yourself in. Some things are more complicated than they appear, and interference rarely ends well for anyone. I hope we understand each other. Diane's face had gone pale. Oh God, Andrew, your job, your life. He could. I don't work for him, I interrupted. He has no leverage over me professionally. You don't understand what he's capable of, she said urgently. Gregory doesn't need professional leverage. He knows people everywhere. He could make things difficult for you in ways you can't imagine. You need to distance yourself from me. Tell him you were just being polite, that it meant nothing, that you won't see me again. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She was scared, but not for herself. For me, this woman who was about to walk through fire was worried about protecting me. No, I said simply. Andrew, I'm done living scared, Diane. I spent 2 years after Rachel left playing it safe, keeping my head down, avoiding anything that might hurt, staying in my lane. You know what happened? I was dying anyway, just slowly, quietly. A death by routine where every day looked exactly like the one before it. This is different, she insisted. This is real consequences, real risk. I know, I said, and I'm tired of running from real things. Diane stared at me, her coffee forgotten. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. I know enough, I said. I know you gave up something you loved because someone convinced you it didn't fit their vision. I know you're brave enough to walk away from comfort and security because you'd rather be yourself than be safe. I know that matters more than staying comfortable. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. This is crazy, she said. We're both crazy. Probably, I agreed, but crazy feels better than numb. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the cafe buzzed with normal life. Students studying, people working on laptops, a couple having a quiet argument near the window, regular people living regular lives, dealing with regular problems. What happens now? Diane asked finally. Now you go stay with your sister. You let Linda handle the legal stuff. You start figuring out who you are when you're not Mrs. Gregory Montgomery. I paused. And if you need someone to talk to, someone who won't judge or calculate the cost, you call me. What about you? She asked. What are you going to do? I thought about it honestly. I'm going to keep showing up to work, keep living my life, and if Gregory Montgomery wants to have a problem with me being friends with someone going through a divorce, that's his problem, not mine. Diane laughed, but it was shaky. Friends, is that what we are? I don't know what we are, I admitted, but I know I'm not walking away. She reached across the table then, and this time she did touch my hand just briefly, just enough for me to feel how cold her fingers were despite the warm cafe. Thank you, she said, for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you, I replied, for reminding me what it feels like to care about something. We talked for another hour about small things and big ones, about her fears of what the next 6 months would bring, about my plans to maybe finally take that photography class I'd been putting off, about Margaret's guest room and how Diane was going to set up a small workspace there. When we finally said goodbye in the parking lot, I watched her drive away in her car and felt something shift inside me. Whatever happened next, I was in it now. No more playing it safe. No more hiding from anything real. 6 months went by and I watched Diane's life get torn apart in ways I couldn't protect her from. Gregory's lawyers worked fast. Within 2 weeks of the divorce filing, stories started appearing in local society pages. Anonymous sources called Diane unstable. One article suggested she'd abandoned her charity work. Another hinted at erratic behavior. I knew exactly where these stories came from, and it made my blood boil. Linda Harper, Diane's attorney, warned us this would happen. She'd seen it before with powerful men who viewed divorce as a business transaction they refused to lose. But knowing it was coming didn't make it easier to watch. I saw Diane every couple of weeks during those months, always coffee shops or public parks, always brief. We both understood that Gregory had people watching, looking for anything they could twist into ammunition. One afternoon at a cafe in Chandler, Diane showed me her phone. Her hands shook as she scrolled through emails from people she'd considered friends. Women from her book club, her yoga class, even her former tennis partner, all distancing themselves. Gregory's influence ran deep. "They think I'm having a breakdown," she said quietly, staring at her untouched latte. Paula sent me the number for her therapist. Janet suggested I take time away from public events until I'm feeling more myself. I wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, but I didn't. Too many eyes around us. "You're the most yourself I've ever seen you," I said instead. She looked up at me, exhausted, but determined. "Linda says it'll get worse before it gets better. Gregory's team hired an investigator. They're going through everything. My credit cards, my phone records, talking to anyone who might say something damaging. Have they talked to you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Diane nodded. "They came to Margaret's house last week, asked about my mental health, whether I'd been drinking heavily, whether I'd been seeing anyone." She paused. "They asked about you specifically." My stomach tightened. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that you're a friend who helped me when I needed support, that there's nothing inappropriate between us." She met my eyes, which is true, Andrew. Whatever this is, it's not what they're trying to make it into, but I could see the fear in her face. Not fear of losing the case, but fear that Gregory's machine would grind us both down until there was nothing left. The settlement negotiations dragged on. Gregory offered amounts that seemed generous on paper, but came with conditions. Diane couldn't talk publicly about their marriage. She'd have to sign away rights to certain properties. She'd agreed to periodic evaluations to prove her mental stability. Each offer felt like another way to control her. Even in divorce, Linda pushed back hard. She had evidence, years of emails where Gregory dictated Diane's schedule, text messages monitoring her location, even recordings from their home security system showing how little time they actually spent together. The separate bedrooms, the separate lives. I kept working, kept living. But part of me was always thinking about Diane, how she was holding up, whether she was sleeping, if Margaret was taking good care of her. My apartment felt lonelier than it had in years, but it was a different kind of loneliness now. Not the numb emptiness I'd felt after Rachel left, but an ache that came from caring about someone I couldn't fully be there for. Then one Tuesday evening in late February, Diane called instead of texting. Her voice sounded different, lighter somehow. "It's done," she said. "We settled. I signed the papers this afternoon." I sat down on my couch, relief washing over me. "How do you feel?" "Free?" she whispered, terrified and free. I took less money than Linda wanted me to fight for, but I couldn't do another month of this. Gregory can have his houses and his reputation. I just wanted out. "Where will you go?" I asked. Margaret said, "I can stay as long as I need, but I'm looking at apartments. small places with good light for a studio. She paused. Andrew, I start teaching next week. The community center hired me. 15 students signed up for my beginner sculpture class. I heard the joy in her voice, real and unguarded. That's incredible, Diane. I'm scared, she admitted. I haven't taught anyone anything in 20 years. What if I'm terrible at it? You won't be. I said, you're going to be amazing. We talked for another hour about nothing important and everything important, about her plans for the class, about my week at work, about a documentary she'd watched. Normal conversation between two people who cared about each other. When we finally hung up, I felt something shift inside me. The waiting was over. Whatever happened next, we could figure it out without Gregory's shadow hanging over everything. I saw her 3 weeks later at a community art fair in Mesa. I'd volunteered to help set up, never expecting to see her there. But suddenly she was walking toward me through the crowd, and I barely recognized her. She wore comfortable clothes, her hair styled simply, and she carried herself differently. Not the careful posture of someone always being watched, but the easy movement of someone who'd finally stopped performing. Andrew, she said, and her smile reached her eyes. I didn't realize you'd be here. Volunteer work, I explained, helping with the booth setup. What about you? The art center has a table. I'm here with 2 of my students. They're showing pieces from class. The pride in her voice was unmistakable. We walked through the fair together, looking at local artists' work, talking easily about techniques and styles. She told me about her students, a teenager working through anxiety, a retired engineer discovering creativity for the first time, a young mother using art as an escape. Each story she shared revealed how much teaching meant to her. Are you happy? I asked, as we stopped in front of a booth selling handmade pottery. Diane considered the question seriously. I'm getting there. Some days I wake up and panic about money or wonder if I made a terrible mistake. But then I go to my class and I watch someone create something they didn't know they could make, and I remember why I left. So yes, I think I'm happy, or at least I'm becoming happy. What about you? She asked. Are you okay? I know Gregory probably made things difficult at your work. He tried. I admitted made some calls, suggested I wasn't reliable, but my boss knows my record. We stood there as other people moved around us, and neither of us seemed ready to leave. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Diane looked at me as the art fair began winding down around us, vendors packing up their displays and families heading toward the parking lot. Andrew, I need to ask you something, and you can absolutely say no. My heart started beating faster. Okay. Would you want to have dinner with me sometime? Not as a friend who helped me through the worst time of my life, not as someone I'm grateful to. Just as Diane, who would really like to have dinner with Andrew. She said it quickly like she'd been practicing. I didn't hesitate. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Her face lit up with relief and something else. Hope, maybe? Really? Because I know this is complicated, I'm your ex-girlfriend's mother, which is probably the weirdest possible situation. And I'm 59 years old and you're 32, and people will definitely have opinions about that. I don't care about any of that, I said, and I meant it. Do you? She thought about it for a moment. I spent 20 years caring what people thought. I'm done with that. I just needed to know if you were okay with it. We made plans for Friday night, a small Italian place in Tempe that neither of us had been to before, somewhere we could just be ourselves without worrying about who might see us. That Friday, I showed up 15 minutes early because I was nervous. I hadn't been on an actual date in over 2 years, and this felt more significant than anything with Rachel ever had. When Diane arrived, she looked beautiful in a simple blue dress, but what struck me most was how relaxed she seemed. Dinner was easy in a way I hadn't expected. We talked about everything. Her students, my work, books we'd read, places we wanted to travel someday. She told me about growing up in Flagstaff with Margaret, how they used to explore the forests and make art from things they found. I told her about my family in Tucson, about my sister who taught elementary school, about my dad's terrible jokes that somehow always made everyone laugh. "Can I ask you something?" Diane said as we shared dessert that night when I asked you to drive me somewhere private. "What made you say yes? You could have just taken me home. You should have." I thought back to that moment in my car, to the desperation in her voice. "You sounded like I felt after Rachel left, like you were drowning and nobody could see it." I couldn't just ignore that. "I was drowning," she said softly. "You threw me a lifeline." I don't think you realize how much that meant. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Dinners turned into weekend trips to Sedona and Flagstaff. We drive through the desert with the windows down, talking about nothing and everything. She showed me how to work with clay in her sister's garage studio, her hands guiding mine. Both of us laughing when my attempts collapsed into shapeless lumps. I attended her first gallery showing 3 months later. A small group exhibition at a Mesa art space where she displayed 3 sculptures. They were beautiful abstract pieces that somehow captured movement and emotion in solid form. I watched her talk to strangers about her work, explaining her process, glowing with confidence I'd never seen before. "I'm so proud of you," I told her afterward as we walked to my car. She stopped and turned to face me. "Andrew, I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. The serious tone in her voice scared me. "I love you," she said. "I know it's only been a few months since the divorce finalized, and maybe it's too soon and maybe I should wait, but I love you. You remind me what it feels like to be myself, to be seen as a whole person instead of just a role I'm playing." Relief and joy flooded through me. "I love you too," I said. And it was the easiest truth I'd ever spoken. We took things slowly after that, both aware that we were building something that mattered. She found her own apartment in downtown Phoenix, a small place with huge windows and enough room for a modest studio. I helped her move in, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs, assembling furniture, painting walls the color she chose. One Sunday morning, about a year after that first night, she asked me to drive somewhere private. We were in her studio. She was teaching me to throw pottery on her wheel, which I was terrible at, but she was patient. Her hands covered mine as we shaped clay that kept wanting to collapse. "You're overthinking it," she said, laughing. "Just feel the clay. Let it tell you what it wants to be." "It wants to be a blob," I said, watching my attempted bowl slide sideways. She stopped the wheel and turned to look at me, clay covering both our hands. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for driving me somewhere private when I needed to escape, for reminding me that I was still a person worth being." "You did the same for me," I said. "I was sleepwalking through life before you, just going through motions, playing it safe, slowly disappearing. You woke me up. We cleaned up the clay, washed our hands, and made lunch together in her tiny kitchen. Simple things that felt profound because we were doing them together. That evening, she showed me sketches for a new sculpture series she wanted to create. Pieces about transformation, about breaking free, about finding yourself after years of being lost. "These are incredible," I said, studying her drawings. "They're about us," she admitted. "Not literally, but what we represent. Choosing courage over comfort. Finding home in unexpected places." I pulled her close, and she fit perfectly against me. "I love you," I said into her hair. "I love you too," she whispered back. We stood there in her studio, surrounded by her art, by the life she'd rebuilt from nothing, by the future we were creating together. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask someone to drive you somewhere private, to see you when you've been invisible, to remind you that you're still worth being. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that person becomes yours.